Scott just made the point.
Thomas Jefferson, you'll read to be a lot more secure, not just. California Governor Jerry Brown signed a bill into law this week requiring any California college or university receiving any state money, and that's pretty much all of them, mandating new uniform procedures for the reporting, counseling, and investigation of alleged sexual misconduct on campus. Now, the new law is called Yes Means Yes, but does it? I'm Steve Green. This is Trifecta. And let's bring on Scott Ott and Bill Whittle and see if this new law means real protection for California college students or is just an unwelcome advance into the dorm room, or maybe something even worse. Gents, it's no surprise that opinions differ widely and wildly on this thing. Slate's Amanda Marcotte writes, the law has no bearing on the vast majority of sexual encounters. It only applies when a student files a sexual assault complaint, and all it does is help the disciplinary board craft its line of questioning to get the important facts. Sounds pretty reasonable. But over at Legal Insurgency, Amy Miller gets deeply honest with what she calls real talk and reminds us that sex happens. Drunk, sloppy, reckless sex happens on college campuses, and there's not a bill in the world that can eliminate the oft-depressing reality of the morning after. This bill not only assumes a drunk male is guilty of assault, but it assumes a drunk female is incapable of consenting to sex and does not define what it means to be incapacitated. Now, by law, in a situation where a substantial amount of alcohol is involved, consent cannot exist. The aggressor is by default a rapist, and an even willing partner is by default a victim. Now, Scott, dating and sex are confusing enough for young adults. Has California muddied the waters on consent, or have they created clear guidelines for those times when a man might argue, well, she never said no?
Well, obviously, there is a problem. And it's not just on college campuses, but, you know, when people irresponsibly drink and get themselves drunk and then get into situations about which they are later ashamed or diseased or unexpectedly carrying a child or whatever, that can be a problem. The question is, what can the law do about it? What can the state of California do about it? And we see a couple of things here. Number one, we see the trap you get into if you accept state and federal money. You take money from the government, and you're going to have to dance to the government's tune. Number two, we have a situation where even the police and the court system sometimes have difficulty determining whether somebody was drunk in a particular situation when committing a crime or a victim of a crime. Now we're asking a drunk guy to figure out whether the girl was too drunk to grant consent. I don't see a promising future for this.
Oh, yeah, and you bring up an important point about state money. You know, it used to be in the old days, if you took the Dane Geld, you'd never be, or if you paid the Dane Geld, you'd never be rid of the Dane. And these days, if you take the Dane Geld, you'll never be rid of the Dane. That's our modern situation here, folks. All right, Bill, before I get to you, I want to read something from feminist author Camille Paglia. Now, she's as erudite as she is fascinating, so you argue with her at your own risk. I'll warn you that. She wrote in Time on Monday, colleges should stick to academics and stop their infantilizing supervision of students' dating lives and authoritarian intrusion that borders on violation of civil liberties. Real crimes should be reported to the police, not to haphazard and ill-trained campus grievance committees. Bill, I think Paglia makes a very strong point here, but isn't there a case to be made that for a 20-year-old kid facing a confusing charge under unclear rules, that going to a grievance committee first might be better than filing a police report, which will stain everybody's records forever?
Where do we start here? First of all, when you began your introduction by saying California Governor Jerry Brown signed into law a bill, ... everything after that's going to be a disaster. We can just start there. Yeah, secondly, as far as Camille Paglia is concerned, I do not know how I can improve upon that sentence or that thought. I mean, I am 100% in agreement with all of this. To the degree that it's an advisory board or a counseling board, that would be nice if it were true, but we all know it's not true. We know it's all a witch hunt. We'll make the political point next, and then we might finally go on to the moral point. The reason this bill was passed was because there are two narratives that the left has to drive in order to have any chance of not getting completely wiped off the board in November. One, of course, is the famous war on women, which had some success for them in 2012 and appears to be backfiring now, so there's some ammunition for that. And the other one, part of the war on women, is this giant idea about this rape culture, about how rapes are going through the ceiling when we all know that they have fallen dramatically, and I mean spectacularly, in the last 10 or 15 years. So the way you increase the number of rapes is by lowering the standard of rape to the point where somebody who, after a drunken encounter, can the next morning say, Well, I didn't actually say no. No, I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes either. And then there you go. You've got your rape culture, you got your war on women, you got all the other things that these left-wing lunatics and monsters, frankly, need in order to stay in power. So let's just get that straight. But I think finally, Steve, the ultimate point here is simply this. The passage of these kind of laws have the same effect that affirmative action have, which is why I oppose affirmative action. What laws like this say are that women are not full human adults. They're not adults. They're not capable of making adult decisions. They're innocent, sad little flowers who are the victims of all kinds of oppression. They don't really have the chops to be out there in the real world without a strong man to protect them. That's really what they're saying here. If they're saying that they're not adult enough to make a decision about how much to drink, whether to go out and drink in the first place, and having had a few drinks, whether or not they want to go to bed with a guy, but a man has all of those abilities and responsibilities, then what this law says is that women are not nearly as capable as men. That's exactly what that law is saying. And frankly, if they want to pass that law, I think that's how they ought to be treated. I think they ought to be treated as delicate little flowers with their little trigger warnings and all the rest of these things, because they themselves continuously assert that while they're women and hear me raw and I'm just an equal to the man, anytime anybody says something nasty, I'm going to break down and cry, or I'm going to have this attack, or I'm going to do this or do that. You either grow up and be equals, or stay where you claim not to want to be in the first place.
All right. Folks, to finish up here, I want to go back to Camille Paglia. In that same article, she had a scary reminder for California college students. She wrote, misled by the naive optimism and you go girl boosterism of their upbringing, young women do not see the animal eyes glowing at them in the dark. They assume that bared flesh and sexy clothes are just a fashion statement containing no messages that might be misread and twisted by a psychotic. They do not understand the fragility of civilization and the constant nearness of savage nature. Now, what California has is a law which emasculates decent men with a presumption of guilt in front of unaccountable college committees. And when you emasculate decent men, you empower evil men just as surely as night follows day. Now, the unintended consequences of California's yes means yes law will extend beyond the confines of paneled meeting rooms and into the darkest corners of every college campus. For Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, I'm Steve Green.